The morning light on Kepler 442b shone through the crystal dome of the Galactic Academy of Sciences. Kim Dae-ho walked slowly through the wide hallways, his worn backpack hanging over one shoulder. Other students moved around him like colorful waves. Some floated with gossamer wings that caught the light. Others clicked across the floor on crystalline legs that sang like wind chimes. A few glided past on tentacles that left wet trails behind them. Dae-ho looked ordinary next to them. He was average height by galactic standards. His black hair was cut short and neat. His brown eyes moved constantly, taking in everything around him. His skin was soft and pale compared to the armored shells and shimmering scales of his classmates. He wore simple clothes from Earth, dark pants and a plain shirt that looked boring next to the elaborate garments of other species. The human had been at the academy for 3 weeks now. He was the first of his kind to be accepted into the most prestigious school in the galaxy. The acceptance letter had surprised everyone back on Earth. Humans were new to galactic society. Most alien species barely knew they existed. As Dae-ho entered his advanced xenobiology classroom, conversation stopped. Dozens of alien eyes turned to watch him. He had gotten used to the stares by now. The whispers followed him everywhere he went. "That is the Deathworlder," said a voice like tinkling bells. It belonged to Yuna, an Etherian with wings like spiderwebs. Her delicate features showed curiosity mixed with fear. "I heard their planet has acid rain," whispered another student. This one was Taimin, a crystalline being whose body was made of living rock that pulsed with inner light. His voice sounded like stones grinding together. "And giant predators that hunt in packs," added Jiwoo, an Aquarian whose gill slits fluttered nervously. Blue-green scales covered her amphibious body, and her large eyes never blinked. Dae-ho pretended not to hear them. He had learned that responding to the whispers only made things worse. Instead, he found his usual seat in the middle of the classroom and pulled out his tablet. The device looked primitive compared to the neural implants and quantum processors the other students used. Dr. Velnara entered the room with a graceful flutter of her gossamer wings. She was ancient by Etherian standards, her translucent skin showing the wisdom patterns that marked her as a master scholar. Her voice was soft and melodic when she spoke. "Good morning, students. Today we will continue our study of symbiotic relationships in extreme environments." She gestured with one long, delicate finger, and holographic images appeared above each student's desk. The images showed various alien worlds. Some had surfaces covered in boiling acid. Others were frozen solid with temperatures that would kill most life instantly. A few showed worlds where the gravity was so strong that normal beings would be crushed flat. "These environments seem impossible for life," Dr. Velnara continued. "Yet life finds a way to survive and even thrive in such places. The key is adaptation and cooperation between species." Dae-ho studied the images carefully. Many of them reminded him of places on Earth. The acid world looked like the volcanic regions of his home planet. The frozen world was not much different from Antarctica. The high-gravity world seemed similar to what humans experienced when they did strength training. "Professor," asked Yuna, her bell-like voice carrying across the room, "how do beings survive on such dangerous worlds? Surely they would die quickly." Dr. Velnara smiled gently. "That is an excellent question. Beings from what we call death worlds develop remarkable abilities. They become stronger, faster, and more adaptable than species from gentler planets. However, this comes at a cost. They also become more aggressive." All eyes turned to Dae-ho again. He felt their stares like physical weight. Some students leaned away from him slightly, as if he might suddenly become dangerous. "The human homeworld, Earth, is classified as a Class 12 death world," Dr. Velnara said, bringing up a new holographic display. "It has extreme weather, dangerous animals, toxic plants, and natural disasters that happen regularly. Most species would consider it completely uninhabitable." The hologram showed Earth from space. It looked beautiful to Dae-ho. Blue oceans, white clouds, green continents. But he could see how other species might find it terrifying. The image zoomed in to show hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and floods. Then it showed some of Earth's animals. Lions hunting zebras, sharks attacking seals, bears catching fish with their massive claws. Taimin made a sound like rocks falling. How did they survive long enough to develop intelligence? "By becoming the ultimate predators," Dr. Velnara answered. "Humans evolved as persistence hunters. They could track prey for days without stopping. They learned to use tools and work together in groups. They developed the ability to throw objects with deadly accuracy. Most importantly, they learned to think and plan better than any other species on their planet. The classroom fell silent. Deho could feel the tension in the air. He kept his expression neutral, but inside he was tired of being treated like a dangerous animal. He was here to learn just like everyone else. "But Professor," said Jiwoo, her gills fluttering faster, "if they are such dangerous predators, why do they seem so harmless?" Dr. Velnara looked directly at Deho. There was something in her ancient eyes that might have been understanding. That, my dear student, is perhaps the most remarkable thing about Deathworlders. They have learned to control their aggressive instincts. They can choose when to be dangerous and when to be gentle. This makes them far more dangerous than any mindless predator, because you never know when that switch might flip. The bell chimed softly, indicating the end of class. Students began gathering their belongings and filing out of the room. As usual, they gave Deho plenty of space. No one wanted to accidentally trigger the sleeping predator in their midst. As Deho packed his simple tablet into his worn backpack, Dr. Velnara approached his desk. Her gossamer wings folded delicately behind her. "Mr. Kim," she said softly, "I hope you know that my lecture was not meant to single you out. I am simply helping the other students understand what they do not know." Deho looked up at her with his brown eyes. "I understand, Professor. They are afraid because they do not know what I might do." "Are they right to be afraid?" she asked gently. Deho considered the question seriously. He thought about Earth, about the wars, the violence, the endless struggle for survival that had shaped his species. Then he thought about why he was here, to learn, to grow, to help his people find their place among the stars. "That depends," he said finally, "on whether they give me a reason to be dangerous." Dr. Velnara nodded slowly. "That is a very honest answer, Mr. Kim. I hope your classmates will learn to see past their fears and recognize the person you choose to be." As Deho left the classroom, he could hear the whispers starting again behind him. The word Deathworlder followed him down the hallway like a shadow. He wondered if his classmates would ever see him as anything more than a dangerous animal, pretending to be civilized. He did not know that very soon. He would have to show them exactly what a human could do when the people around him were in danger. And when that moment came, the whispers would turn to respectful silence. 2 weeks had passed since Deho first attended Dr. Velnara's xenobiology class. The routine had become familiar to him. Wake up in his small dormitory room. Eat breakfast in the cafeteria while other students whispered and stared. Attend lectures where professors spoke about life across the galaxy. Study alone in the library because no one wanted to sit near the Deathworlder. Today felt different, though. Park So-jin had arrived at the academy 3 days ago. She was the second human to be accepted into the prestigious school. Having another person from Earth nearby made Deho feel less alone, even though they had barely spoken to each other yet. So-jin sat 2 rows behind him in Dr. Velnara's class. She was smaller than Deho, with long black hair tied back in a simple ponytail. Her dark eyes were just as alert as his, constantly watching and learning. The other students seemed even more nervous with 2 humans in the classroom now. They whispered about Deathworlder pack behavior and hunting tactics. Dr. Velnara stood at the front of the classroom, her gossamer wings catching the morning light. Today's lesson focused on symbiotic relationships in extreme environments. Holographic displays showed strange creatures living together on worlds where survival seemed impossible. On the lava planet Pirion 7, we find one of nature's most remarkable partnerships, Dr. Velnara explained. Her melodic voice filled the quiet classroom. The thermal worms live inside the shells of magma crabs. The worms eat parasites that would otherwise kill the crabs. In return, the crabs share their heat, which the worms need to survive. Yuna raised one delicate hand. Her wing membrane shimmered as she spoke. "Professor, how do such partnerships begin? Surely one species would try to eat the other first." "An excellent question," Dr. Velnara replied. "Often these relationships start during times of great danger. When survival is threatened, species that might normally compete will sometimes work together instead." Tayman's crystalline body pulsed with curiosity. But how do they know to trust each other? "Trust must be earned," said Dr. Velnara, "usually through small acts that prove neither species means harm to the other." Deho found the lesson interesting. It reminded him of stories from Earth about unlikely animal partnerships. Cleaner fish and sharks, birds and rhinoceros, humans and dogs. His home planet was full of examples where different species helped each other survive. Jiwoo shifted nervously in her seat, her gill slits fluttering. What happens when one species becomes too powerful? Do they still need their partners? Dr. Velnara was about to answer when alarms began blaring throughout the building. The sound was sharp and urgent, designed to cut through any noise and grab immediate attention. Red warning lights flashed on the walls. The holographic displays flickered and disappeared. Students looked around in confusion and growing fear. The Etherians began making high-pitched sounds of distress. The crystallines dimmed their natural light. The Aquarians released clouds of stress chemicals into the air. Dr. Velnara pressed her hand to a communication device near her ear. Her ancient face grew pale as she listened to the emergency message. Her gossamer wings trembled slightly. "Students, please remain calm," she said, but her voice carried new tension. "We are going into emergency lockdown procedures immediately." Heavy barriers slammed down over the windows with loud metallic clangs. The classroom door sealed itself with an electronic hiss. Air recyclers hummed to life as the room switched to internal life support systems. "Professor, what is happening?" asked Yuna, her bell-like voice now high with panic. Dr. Velnara hesitated, then decided her students deserved the truth. "There has been an escape from the maximum security detention facility. A very dangerous prisoner has broken free and is somewhere in this sector." Taemin's rocky body made grinding sounds of fear. "What kind of prisoner?" "A Huntarian named Kethvar," Dr. Velnara said quietly. "He was convicted of murdering 17 beings across 3 different star systems. He is classified as an apex predator from a high-gravity world." The classroom fell into shocked silence. Everyone knew about Huntarians from their nightmares and horror stories. 8 feet tall with armored shells that could stop most weapons. Claws sharp enough to cut through metal. 4 eyes that could see in any light condition. The ability to track prey across vast distances using scent and heat signatures. Jiwoo made a choking sound. "How long until security forces arrive?" Dr. Velnara checked her communication device again. 15 minutes, maybe 20. The attack damaged several security checkpoints and they need to clear each area carefully. 15 minutes felt like forever when facing a creature that could kill them all in seconds. The alien students huddled together in small groups based on their species. The Etherians clustered near the air vents, their natural instinct telling them to find escape routes. The crystallines formed a defensive circle, though their light was too dim to be effective. The Aquarians released more stress chemicals, making the air thick and hard to breathe. Daeho noticed that Sojin had moved closer to him without anyone else realizing it. She sat perfectly still, but her eyes were alert and focused. She was not panicking like the other students. Instead, she seemed to be thinking and planning. "Professor," Daeho said calmly, "tell us about Huntarian anatomy. What are their weaknesses?" Dr. Velnara looked surprised by the question. "Mr. Kim, I hardly think now is the time for a biology lesson. It might be the most important lesson we ever get," Daeho replied. His voice was steady and controlled, completely different from the panicked voices of his classmates. Sojin nodded in agreement. "Knowledge is our best weapon right now." Dr. Velnara studied both humans carefully. Something in their calm demeanor seemed to steady her own nerves slightly. "Very well. Huntarians have excellent senses but rely heavily on movement detection. They have armored carapaces, but the joints between plates are vulnerable. Their claws are their primary weapons, but they also carry energy weapons taken from their victims." "What about their behavior patterns?" Sojin asked. "They are ambush predators by nature. They prefer to stalk their prey and attack when victims are most vulnerable. They enjoy the fear of their targets and often play with them before making the kill." Daeho and Sojin exchanged a quick look. Other students might have missed it, but there was communication in that glance. Plans being made, preparations beginning. The building shook suddenly as something heavy crashed into it several floors below them. Emergency lighting flickered. In the distance, they could hear the sound of energy weapons firing and the screams of other students or staff members. "He is getting closer," whispered Yuna. Her wings wrapped around herself like a protective blanket. Dr. Velnara tried to contact security again, but only static came through her communication device. They were alone, trapped in a room with nowhere to run, waiting for a monster that had already killed 17 beings. But Daeho was no longer sitting in his chair like a helpless student. He had moved to examine the emergency equipment stored along the classroom walls. Sojin was doing the same thing on the opposite side of the room. They moved quietly and purposefully, like they were following a plan none of the other students could understand. The sounds of destruction grew louder. Something was climbing through the building, floor by floor, hunting for new prey. And in the sealed classroom, two humans began to prepare for war while their alien classmates cowered in fear, not knowing that the most dangerous predators in the room were about to reveal themselves. The sounds outside the classroom grew closer and more terrifying with each passing minute. Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors. Metal screeched as claws tore through barriers. Occasionally, a scream would cut through the air and then stop abruptly. Each sound made the alien students huddle closer together in fear. Daeho had found several items along the emergency supply wall. Fire suppression foam canisters, emergency oxygen tanks, a basic medical kit with surgical tools, a gravitational field generator used for emergency repairs. He examined each item carefully, his mind working through possibilities that his classmates could not imagine. Sojin was investigating the laboratory equipment at the back of the classroom. Chemical storage containers, microscopic analysis tools, specimen preservation acids, molecular bond dissolvers. She handled each substance with the careful precision of someone who understood exactly how dangerous they could be. "What are you two doing?" asked Taemin, his crystalline voice cracking with stress. "Those supplies will not help us against a Huntarian." Daeho looked at the frightened alien student. "Everything can be a weapon if you know how to use it." Dr. Velnara watched both humans with growing fascination. Their behavior was completely different from the terrified reactions of her other students. Instead of panic, they showed focus. Instead of despair, they showed preparation. A tremendous crash shook the entire floor. The sound came from just outside their corridor. Kethvar had reached their level of the building. Through the sealed door, they could hear the Huntarian's voice. It was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. He spoke in the common galactic language, but his accent made the words sound threatening and cruel. "Little prey animals, I can smell your fear. I know you are hiding somewhere close. Come out and make this easy on yourselves. I promise to make your deaths quick if you do not run." Yuna made a sound like breaking glass. Her gossamer wings shook so badly she could barely stay upright. "He is right outside. He will find us soon." "The door will not hold him for long," Jiwoo whispered, her gill slits opening and closing rapidly. "Huntarian claws can cut through almost anything." Dr. Velnara tried her communication device one more time, but still received only static. The security forces were not coming fast enough. Whatever happened next, they would have to face it alone. Heavy footsteps stopped directly outside their classroom door. Everyone froze. Even the air recyclers seemed to go quiet. In that terrible silence, they could hear the Huntarian sniffing. His enhanced senses were analyzing the air for traces of his prey. "Interesting," Kethvar said, his voice now clearly coming from just beyond the door. "I smell something unusual. Most of you are the typical frightened herbivores I expected. But there is something else here. Something that does not smell afraid." Daeho stood perfectly still, but Sojin could see the subtle changes in his posture. His weight shifted to the balls of his feet. His hands hung loose at his sides, ready to move quickly. His breathing became slower and more controlled. These were not the actions of a frightened student. These were the preparations of a predator. Massive claws began scraping against the reinforced door. The sound was like nails on a chalkboard, but 100 times louder and more horrible. Sparks flew as the Huntarian's claws found purchase in the metal and began tearing through it. "Please," whimpered Yuna. "Someone help us." "Security forces are still 10 minutes away," Dr. Velnara said, her voice barely audible. "The door might last 5 minutes if we are lucky." Kethvar laughed outside. It was a sound like boulders falling down a cliff. "I can hear you whispering, little prey. Are you making peace with your gods? Good. You will meet them very soon." The door began to buckle inward. Each strike from the Huntarian's claws bent the metal a little more. Cracks appeared along the edges where the door met the wall. Emergency alarms blared even louder, but no help was coming. So Jin moved to the other side of the room, positioning herself near a different wall. She caught Daeho's eye and nodded slightly. Whatever plan they had formed, they were both ready to execute it. "Stay behind the laboratory tables," Daeho said quietly to the other students. His voice carried a new tone of authority that made even Dr. Velnara obey without question. The reinforced door finally gave way with a tremendous crash. Metal fragments scattered across the classroom floor. Dust and debris filled the air, and through the destruction stepped Kethvar. He was exactly as terrifying as the stories described. 8 feet tall with a black armored carapace that gleamed under the emergency lights. 4 red eyes glowed in a face that was part insect and part nightmare. His claws were longer than a human forearm and looked sharp enough to cut through bone. In one hand he carried a plasma caster taken from a security guard. Blue blood still dripped from the weapon. The alien students screamed and tried to hide behind tables and equipment. Their natural instincts told them to run, but there was nowhere to go. The Huntarian had found them and they were trapped. Kethvar surveyed the room with his 4 glowing eyes. He saw the cowering Etherians with their delicate gossamer wings, the terrified crystallines whose inner light had almost completely faded, the panicked Aquarians releasing clouds of stress chemicals. All of them were prey animals, exactly what he had expected to find. But then his gaze fell on Deho. The human student stood in the middle of the classroom, not hiding behind furniture like the others. His brown eyes looked directly into the Huntarian's red ones without flinching. There was no terror in his expression, no desperate pleading. Instead, there was something that made Kethvar pause in confusion. Recognition, one predator looking at another. "You are different from the others, small one," Kethvar said, his deep voice filled with curiosity. "You do not smell of fear, why?" Deho's lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. "Because I am not prey." For the first time in his violent career, Kethvar felt a chill of uncertainty. This soft-looking creature should be cowering like the others. It should be begging for mercy or trying to flee. Instead, it stood there calmly as if it were the one in control of the situation. "Impossible," Kethvar snarled, raising his plasma caster. "Everything is prey to a Huntarian. I will show you fear before you die." He aimed the weapon at the group of alien students huddled behind the laboratory tables. One shot would kill several of them at once. Their screams would teach this strange human the proper respect for an apex predator. But as his finger tightened on the trigger, Deho spoke again. "So-Jin," he said in Korean, his voice calm and steady. "Get them behind the reinforced tables, now." And suddenly Kethvar realized he had made a terrible mistake. There were not 1 but 2 of these strange creatures in the room, and they were working together. Before he could adjust his aim, everything changed. The classroom became a battlefield, and the Huntarian discovered that he was not the only apex predator in the room. In fact, he might not even be the most dangerous one. The moment So-Jin heard Deho speak in Korean, she moved like lightning. Her body flowed from stillness to motion in a way that defied what the other students thought possible. She grabbed Yuna and Taemin, pulling them behind the heaviest laboratory table in the room. Her movements were efficient and precise, wasting no energy on panic or hesitation. "Stay down," she told them in the common galactic language. "Do not move unless I tell you to." The Etherian and crystalline students obeyed without question. Something in So-Jin's voice carried absolute authority. Dr. Velnara helped guide Jiwoo and the other students to safety behind additional tables, her ancient wisdom telling her to trust these humans even though she did not understand what was happening. Kethvar tracked So-Jin's movement with 2 of his 4 eyes while keeping the other 2 focused on Deho. His predator instincts were screaming warnings now. These creatures moved wrong. They did not flee like prey animals. Instead, they positioned themselves like hunters setting up an ambush. "What are you?" Kethvar demanded, his plasma caster swiveling between the 2 humans. Deho picked up one of the fire suppression canisters from the emergency supplies. He tested its weight in his hands like a warrior evaluating a new weapon. "We are what happens when evolution decides that everything on a planet should try to kill you," he said conversationally. "We are the ones who survived." Kethvar fired his plasma caster at Deho. The energy beam was hot enough to melt steel and fast enough to kill most beings before they could react. But Deho was already moving, his human reflexes allowing him to anticipate and dodge the shot. The plasma beam struck the wall where he had been standing, leaving a glowing hole in the reinforced metal. "Too slow," Deho observed, now standing in a completely different position. "On my world, we have predators much faster than you. We learned to avoid them by the time we could walk." The Huntarian roared in frustration and fired again. This time, Deho threw himself sideways, rolling behind a bank of laboratory equipment. The plasma beam missed by inches, but the human was already moving to a new position. So-Jin used the distraction to grab several chemical containers from the storage area. Her hands moved with the steady precision of someone who had studied dangerous substances extensively. She began mixing compounds together, creating something that made the air around her shimmer with barely contained energy. "You cannot hide forever." "Little mammals," Kethvar snarled, advancing into the room. His claws clicked against the floor with each step. "I will tear this place apart to reach you." "We are not hiding," Deho replied from somewhere behind the equipment. "We are hunting." Those 3 words sent a chill through Kethvar that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. In all his years of killing across the galaxy, no prey had ever claimed to be hunting him. The concept was so alien to his experience that he almost could not process it. So Jin suddenly appeared on his left side, moving with the fluid grace of a trained dancer. She threw a container of mixed chemicals at his feet. When it struck the floor, it exploded into a cloud of vapor that made his 4 eyes water and burned his sensitive respiratory system. "Chemical warfare," she explained calmly as Kethvar stumbled backward, temporarily blinded. "Humans developed it before we learned to use tools properly." The Huntarian swung his massive claws where he thought she was standing, but Jin had already moved away. His claws struck only empty air. For the first time in his predatory career, Kethvar was fighting opponents he could not track or predict. Deho emerged from behind the laboratory equipment carrying an improvised spear made from a metal support rod and surgical instruments from the medical kit. The weapon looked primitive compared to the Huntarian's natural claws and stolen energy weapon, but the way Deho held it showed he knew exactly how to use it. Spears were humanity's first great invention, he said, keeping the pointed weapon between himself and Kethvar. Simple technology, but very effective against large predators. Kethvar tried to grab the spear with his claws, but Deho used its length to stay just out of reach. Every time the Huntarian lunged forward, the human danced backward, the spear point always threatening vital areas between the armored plates. "Stand still and fight like a warrior," Kethvar roared. "Why?" Deho asked, genuinely curious. "On Earth, the creatures who stood still and fought got eaten. The ones who survived were the ones who learned to think." So Jin had moved to the gravitational field generator near the emergency supplies. Her fingers worked quickly over its controls, adjusting settings that were never meant to be changed in field conditions. The device began to hum with increasing power. "So Jin, how much longer?" Deho asked in Korean, still keeping his spear pointed at the increasingly frustrated Huntarian. 30 seconds, she replied in the same language. "Keep him in the center of the room." Kethvar did not understand Korean, but he could tell the humans were coordinating some kind of plan. His predator instinct screamed at him to escape, but his pride would not let him flee from creatures that should have been easy prey. He raised his plasma caster and fired rapidly, trying to catch at least one of the humans in the deadly energy beams, but they moved like nothing he had ever hunted before. They seemed to know where he was going to aim before he aimed there. They flowed around his attacks like water around stones. "Impossible," he gasped. "Nothing moves that fast." "We are not moving fast," Deho explained patiently, still dancing around the Huntarian's attacks. "We are moving smart. There is a difference." The gravitational field generator reached full power with a deep, thrumming sound that made everyone's bones vibrate. Jin's hand hovered over the activation control. "Now," she said quietly. The artificial gravity in the room suddenly shifted. Instead of pulling everything toward the floor, it began pulling everything toward a point directly above Kethvar's head. The massive Huntarian found himself lifted off his feet, his 8-foot frame spinning helplessly in midair. His plasma caster went flying as he tried to grab onto something solid. His claws scraped against the walls and furniture but could not find purchase. For the first time in his life, the apex predator was completely helpless. Deho caught the spinning plasma caster with practiced ease. He examined the alien weapon for a few seconds, understanding its operation through pure intuition. "Interesting design," he commented, then tossed it to Jin. "Can you make this into something more useful?" "Give me 2 minutes," she said, already beginning to disassemble the energy weapon with tools from the laboratory. Kethvar struggled against the altered gravity field, but it was useless. The more he fought, the faster he spun. His 4 eyes rolled wildly as he tried to focus on his tormentors. "This is impossible," he repeated, his voice now high with something that might have been fear. "You are just prey animals. You cannot do this to me." Deho looked up at the helpless Huntarian with something that might have been pity, That is where you made your mistake, he said softly. You thought we were prey, but on Earth we learned something very important. The most dangerous predators are not the ones with the biggest claws or the sharpest teeth. The most dangerous predators are the ones who can think. From behind the laboratory tables, the alien students watched in stunned silence as their human classmates systematically dismantled a creature from their worst nightmares. These were not the soft, harmless beings they had imagined. These were apex predators from the most dangerous world in the galaxy, and they had finally stopped pretending to be anything else. Sojin finished modifying the plasma caster in less than 2 minutes. Her nimble fingers had rewired the weapon's power systems and connected several chemical containers to its energy matrix. What had once been a simple killing tool was now something far more sophisticated and dangerous. Ready? She announced, holding up the transformed weapon. Deho nodded and began adjusting the gravitational field generator. Instead of keeping Kethvar suspended in midair, he started moving the gravity field around the room in precise patterns. The 8-foot Huntarian was pulled and pushed like a puppet on invisible strings, unable to control his own movement. Stop this, Kethvar demanded, his voice now cracking with desperation. Fight me properly like warriors should. This is how humans fight, Deho replied calmly. We use every advantage we can find. We turn our environment into a weapon. We make our enemies fight on our terms, not theirs. The alien students watched in fascination and growing horror as Deho demonstrated complete mastery over the classroom systems. He used the artificial gravity to slam Kethvar into walls, then pull him away just before the impact could cause serious damage. He spun the Huntarian until the predator's 4 eyes could no longer focus properly. He made the gravity field pulse in patterns that disrupted the creature's inner ear and balance sensors. How does he know how to do that? Whispered Taemin, his crystalline voice filled with awe. Dr. Velnara had been observing both humans with the trained eye of a xenobiologist. They are improvising, she said quietly. Everything they are doing, they are learning in real time. Their brains are processing information and adapting faster than our computers could. Sojin aimed her modified plasma caster at Kethvar, but did not fire immediately. Instead, she began speaking in the common galactic language, her voice carrying the cold precision of a battlefield medic. Your carapace has 17 major joints, she said clinically. Your respiratory system has 3 main intake valves. Your circulatory system has 2 primary pumps and 4 secondary ones. Your neural cluster is protected by bone plating. But there is a soft spot exactly 7 centimeters behind your left secondary eye. Kethvar's struggles became more frantic as he realized what she was describing. How do you know Huntarian anatomy? I studied it, Sojin replied simply. On Earth we have a saying, know your enemy better than they know themselves. I have read every scientific paper ever written about your species. I know exactly how to kill you in 47 different ways. 47? Asked Deho with mild interest. 48 now, Sojin corrected herself, examining her modified weapon. This chemical mixture will dissolve your carapace in approximately 30 seconds. It will be very painful. For the first time since entering the classroom, Kethvar experienced genuine terror. These creatures were not just fighting him, they were dissecting him like a laboratory specimen. They understood his biology better than he did. They had turned his own predatory nature against him. Please, he whispered, the word feeling strange in his throat. I surrender. Deho looked genuinely surprised. You surrender? To prey animals? You are not prey, Kethvar said, his voice now small and defeated. I do not know what you are, but you are not prey. We are human, Sojin said matter-of-factly. We are from a world where surrender means death, where mercy is a luxury most creatures cannot afford. We learn to survive by being more ruthless than anything trying to eat us. Deho began lowering Kethvar toward the floor, using the gravity controls. But instead of setting him down gently, he positioned the Huntarian in the exact center of the room where escape would be most difficult. But we also learned something else. Deho continued. We learned that the strongest predators know when to stop hunting. We learned that true power comes from choosing when to use our abilities. Kethvar landed heavily on the floor, his 8-foot frame no longer imposing now that he understood what he was truly facing. The plasma burns on his carapace were minor. The chemical residue from Sojin's attacks had caused some discomfort, but no permanent damage. Despite having him completely helpless, the humans had chosen not to cause serious harm. Why? Kethvar asked, genuinely confused. You could have killed me easily. Why did you hold back? So Jin kept her modified weapon trained on him while answering. Because we are not you. We do not kill for pleasure. We kill only when we have no other choice. Dr. Velnara emerged from behind the laboratory tables, her gossamer wings trembling with residual fear and newfound respect. The other alien students followed her cautiously, keeping their distance from both the defeated Huntarian and the humans who had defeated him. That was incredible, Dr. Velnara said softly. I have studied predator species for 3 centuries, but I have never seen anything like that. You turned the entire room into a weapon. Humans are tool users, Deho explained, beginning to shut down the gravitational field generator. Everything around us is a potential tool. Gravity, chemistry, physics, psychology. We use whatever works. Yuna's bell-like voice was barely audible. Are all humans like you? Sojin considered the question seriously. Most humans could do what we did, given enough motivation and preparation time. We are not special among our people. We are just well-educated. The building's emergency systems announced that security forces had finally arrived and were sweeping the facility. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridors as armed guards moved from room to room, securing each area. Kethvar looked up at his captors with something that might have been respect mixing with his fear. I have killed beings across 17 star systems. I have hunted prey on worlds you cannot imagine, but I have never faced anything like you two. That is because you never faced anything that fought back intelligently, Deho said. You hunted herbivores and scavengers, creatures whose instincts told them to run or hide. We come from a world where everything hunts everything else, where survival requires both intelligence and aggression. Your world must be hell, Kethvar said quietly. Sojin's expression softened slightly. It is beautiful, she said. Dangerous, but beautiful. It made us strong enough to survive anywhere in the galaxy, strong enough to protect others who cannot protect themselves. The classroom door, which had been destroyed by Kethvar's entrance, filled with heavily armed security guards. They burst in expecting to find a massacre. Instead, they found a defeated Huntarian sitting calmly on the floor, while 2 human students kept watch over him. Impossible, breathed the security captain, a tall being with blue skin and multiple arms. How did you subdue a Huntarian? Teamwork, Deho said simply. As the security guard secured Kethvar with restraint fields and energy dampeners, the alien students gradually approached the 2 humans. There was no more whispering about dangerous Deathworlders, no more nervous glances and fearful distances. Instead, there was something new in their eyes. Recognition that they had been in the presence of true apex predators who had chosen to use their abilities to protect rather than destroy. They had witnessed the difference between mindless violence and controlled lethality guided by moral choice. The humans had shown them what it truly meant to be the dominant species from a death world, and everyone in that classroom would never forget the lesson they had learned about what lurked beneath humanity's deceptively soft exterior. 3 weeks had passed since the incident. The classroom felt different now. Where once alien students had chatted loudly about their homeworlds and achievements, now they spoke in quieter voices. Where once they had made jokes about primitive species, now they chose their words carefully. Deho sat in his usual seat near the back corner. He had the same worn textbook open to the same page about galactic biology. His pen moved across his notebook in the same steady way it always had. To anyone watching, he looked exactly like the quiet human exchange student who had arrived 6 months ago. But everything had changed. Heiwan approached his desk slowly. Her crystalline body reflected the classroom lights in nervous patterns. She had practiced this conversation for days, but the words still felt strange in her mouth. Deho, she said softly, may I ask you something? He looked up from his notes. His brown eyes were warm and friendly again, just like they had been before. Of course, Heiwan. What would you like to know? She sat down carefully in the chair beside him. Her crystal form made small chiming sounds as she settled. I have been thinking about Earth, about your home world. Could you tell me what it was like growing up there? Deho smiled. It was a gentle smile that reached his eyes. It was beautiful. I lived near mountains covered in green trees. In spring, cherry blossoms would bloom everywhere. The air smelled sweet and fresh. But, Heiwan paused, searching for the right words. What about the dangerous things? The predators your people faced? Daeho's expression grew thoughtful. He set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. My grandfather used to tell me stories. His grandfather lived through times when humans still had to worry about wild animals. Bears that could break trees with their paws, cats with teeth as long as my hand, wolves that hunted in packs. Young-Soo, sitting nearby, turned his collective attention toward them. His hive-mind species rarely showed individual curiosity, but this conversation was different. How did your ancestors survive? Young-Soo asked. Our records show Earth had more dangerous predators than most worlds. Daeho thought for a moment. They learned to work together. They made tools. They studied their enemies and found their weaknesses. But most importantly, they never gave up. When something tried to hunt them, they decided to hunt it back. Taemin, the insectoid student, clicked his mandibles nervously. But you seem so peaceful. Before the incident, I never would have thought humans could be dangerous. We learned to control it, Daeho said simply. My mother taught me to be kind to others. My teachers showed me how to solve problems with words instead of violence. But the old instincts are still there. They sleep until we need them. Professor Veltar floated into the classroom. His gaseous form seemed more solid than it had in weeks. He had been taking time to recover from the shock of seeing a student become a predator in his peaceful classroom. Good morning, class, he said. His voice carried less of its usual confident tone. Today we will continue our study of adaptation in hostile environments. The students took their seats. But instead of the eager chatter that usually filled the room, there was respectful quiet. Soo-jin, the telepathic student, raised one of her wispy appendages. Professor, may we ask about Deathworld species? Real questions, not just theory. Professor Veltar's form flickered. He had avoided this topic since the incident. What would you like to know?
How do they think differently from us?
She asked. When I touched Daeho's mind during the danger, it was unlike anything I had ever felt. So calm but so focused on survival. Daeho shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had not known she could read thoughts during that moment. Deathworld species develop different mental patterns, the professor explained. They must process threats quickly and respond without hesitation. Their minds can switch between peaceful and combat modes in seconds. Is it frightening? Asked Jiwoo. To have those thoughts inside your head? Daeho considered the question carefully. It is like having a tool you hope you never need to use. You know it is there, but you do not think about it every day. Most humans go their whole lives without ever needing to access those instincts. But you did need them, Haewon said quietly. Yes, he nodded, and I am glad they were there. Not just for me, but for all of you. Minho, who had been silent until now, spoke up. On my world, we have ancient stories about warriors. Beings who could fight when needed but chose peace when possible. We thought they were myths. They were not myths, Daeho said. Every human carries a warrior inside them. But we also carry teachers, healers, artists, and dreamers. The trick is knowing which one to let out at the right time. The classroom fell silent as the students absorbed this. They looked at their human classmate with new eyes. He was still the same person who helped them with difficult homework. Still the one who shared his lunch when others forgot theirs. Still the quiet student who listened more than he spoke. But now they understood the complete picture. Are all humans like you? Taemin asked. Different but similar, Daeho replied. My sister is a doctor. She saves lives every day. My brother is an engineer who builds bridges. My cousin is a teacher who helps children learn. But if someone threatened their families, they would all become something else for as long as they needed to. Professor Veltar began his lesson, but the atmosphere had shifted permanently. The alien students no longer saw humans as primitive or simple. They understood now that Earth's children were complex beings who had learned to balance opposing natures. As the class ended, students approached Daeho one by one. They asked quiet questions about Earth, about human history, about how his people had learned to live together despite their dangerous potential. He answered each question patiently, helping them understand that being dangerous and being good were not opposites. They were tools in the same toolkit, to be used wisely. When the classroom finally emptied, Daeho packed his books slowly. Tomorrow, new human exchange students would arrive. His alien classmates would watch them differently now. They would see not just peaceful scholars, but the descendants of Earth's apex predators who had chosen to reach for the stars. The galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. And perhaps that was exactly as it should be.